Hello, everyone. And
Hello.
my name is Maxine Tina Vann Thompson, and I am so proud to be a member of this family. It was from this family that a lot of creativity flowed, and I never understood it when I was growing up. And I always say we are the offspring of those who chose to survive the Middle Passage. And so now to see us here celebrating, one of the missions I found that I have a calling for is to make sure people write their stories down. And if we don't write our stories, the media will write it. And if you listen to the media, African American men are killers, thugs, mugs, and we see the prison population that we have now. But when I wrote this book, I was trying to understand who I was. This is a picture of my mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, and the unknown African that ironically looked like my late sister Nancy. And I have a poem I wrote about black women. I'm just gonna skip around and read some parts from this book. This is my first novel. I've written 15 since then, and well, some are novels, short stories, novellas, and nonfiction. And I'm also a literary agent for over 100 and some books. I've edited over 1,000 books. Now I'm trying to work in the movie industry. That's still up in the air, but you never know what can happen. I do believe dreams are possible. When I looked at the little girl dancing on the thing with the Indian chief hat on, trying to ballet, because I knew that there should be some black ballerinas, and lo and behold, we do have our first lead black ballerina. And my book, LA Blues, I wrote about my outcry. Why is there no outcry for black men that are being killed, young men being killed in the street? And I named the character that got killed Trayvon. 2 years later, Trayvon Martin. So my series, LA Blues, is about police corruption, FBI corruption, racism, the things we're seeing. So I'm learning now to just follow the spirit and write what I'm supposed to write. But this book helped me understand who I was. So the first poem I'm going to read, I get thirsty when I read. Okay, The Ebony Tree. And I wrote this in 1989 for the African American woman. Why does no one ever laud me, whose sable hands calm troubled seas? My roots rent from the earth's dark boughs, daughters of song perched on my leaves. Yet society applauds the white bough of the bleached birch tree. Is it because you do not boast the ebony hued bark like me? Induced to shade your hallowed ground, your tributaries to follow. Under your winds my branches fold, my trunk too often made hollow. Pruning my putrefied branches, yes, for the whole world to behold. I will reclaim lost saffron shores of the river Nile of my soul. And this is about black women reclaiming their beauty, their rights. We're seeing more and more of it happening now. Now I have to give credit to God for to Jehovah God for the gift to be able to write. But the other thing, this story was inspired by my sister, my younger sister Sonia. When my mother died, she was doing a video. And writers always get their inspiration from a lot of things. And one of the things is that I named her Imani in here. This story is fiction, but it's got a lot of little factions in it. But Imani persisted. First and foremost, she was a journalist. She wanted to know the 5 W's. When they first moved to Delray, who did they have as friends? What had it been like living in Delray? And then at the end, as a child, she merely viewed her siblings as old people. But as an adult, she viewed most of them as crazy. Now, this was written 20 years ago.
I don't feel crazy anymore.
Right, but this is because she was young. You keep living, like my mother used to say. Even if there was an engineer, psychologist, business owners, and even a professional writer numbered among them, they were so different from her. A perpetual bubble of violence always percolated under their skins, threatening to erupt like a volcano. How had they sprang from the same loins? Why were they so different from her, she wondered. Why wouldn't her mother tell her anything about her past? Imani wanted to know. And I broke the book up into bondage. And that was when my mother was having her babies, as they said. And this was a scene that was a turning point and an epiphany for her when she was pregnant with me. I think that was like hitting rock bottom when she had 6 babies, and I was the one that was like, oh my goodness, I can't take no more. But see, you never know, that very child you don't want could be the very one can discover the cure for AIDS. And so anyway, the mortgage was due and she needed coal for the furnace. Old man Winter was breathing down their necks, easing up under every crack in the house and climbing under the covers with them at night. And she said in the spring she'd have a garden again. Then she went down. Suddenly an idea as fructose as warm syrup spreading over the waffles of her brain invaded her mind. The upstairs of her house was empty. She could take in boarders. Why hadn't she thought of that before? The redolent scent of I'd be writing words, I don't even know, sarsaparilla, how you pronounce that sign? Yeah, from an old vine in her garden made her think of Mama Lovey and the last winter of her life as she lay dying. Mama Lovey's sick room smelled of sarsaparilla. Okay. Although Mama Lovey still loved her tea with it in it, she had been too weak and too sick to even hold the amber liquid down. Jewel had been with her grandmother when she drew her last breath, but sometimes she could swear that Lovey had never died. She sensed her presence, so Jewel often dreamed of Lovey whenever she was troubled. Somehow, Lovey was a fly buzzing around in Jewel's head. Remembering Mama Lovey's last words, she said to herself, "This too will pass." And that was one of her sayings. And then I have a story that my father, because I often say, well, where did the storytelling come from? And it came from my father. So this, and I talked about their relationship. And the older I get, I say, God, they had a beautiful relationship. You know, as you get older, I think of how in a time when a black man was not considered anything, my mother made him a king in our house. She washed his back. Till she died, he never knew what it was to have to fix his own plate. The plate was sitting in front of him. So when he came home, it was like the king was home, and we had to run and take off his shoes, wait on him hand and foot. So he was the man, and so many men are no longer the man in their own house, and that's where a lot of problems come. But this is one of the things. It was generally Sally who offered a stranger a meal, whereas Jewel, who counted every bite she had to scrape up for her own children, foamed at the mouth. She could not fathom the idea of how Sally took to stray men. But Sally would come back and tell Jewel stories that he and his men friends told, tall tales which she loved to hear. Her favorite story was the one that Sally told her about their friend, John Henry Jackson, and how he left the South. John Yeah, John Henry Johnson. Let me have my water. Please, thank you. Now this is one of the stories my father told. Okay. John Henry Jackson was a sharecropper in Natchez, Mississippi before he came north to Delray. One Monday morning, after carousing all weekend, he went to work with a hangover. John Henry's job was to lead the mule out of the barn and into the fields. This particular day, the mule wouldn't budge. When John Henry commenced to cursing him, the mule hauled off and kicked him. Before John Henry knew it, he had pulled out his knife and cut the mule. Now, the overseer happened to be outside the barn and saw what John Henry did. The overseer, a white man, felt more human feeling for a mule than for any two-legged being called a nigger. So he came inside of the barn and threw John Henry out into the yard. In a split second, the overseer got on top of John Henry and was getting the best of him. John Henry said he didn't know what made him pull back out his knife on a white man in the South, but he must have been possessed. Whatever the case, yeah, please. Okay, thank you. Whatever the case, okay, he commenced to goosing the overseer with his knife. By the time the overseer staggered off John Henry, his shirt was splattered with as much blood as a chicken running around after his head had been cut off. John Henry ran all the way to his cabin on the sharecropping roads. Once he reached there, his wife, Franny, who'd been looking out the window, had a little sack packed with his things. They didn't have to say a word. They both knew that either the man's brothers or the Ku Klux Klan would be coming for John Henry before the sun went down. John Henry said he set out running through the swamp so fast that he cried out, Lord, you just move those big trees and I'll take care of the sapling bushes. And he didn't stop running till he made it to Delray, Michigan. Sally always Sally always ended the story with, that John Henry, know he can lie. Jill loved to hear a story when Sally told it. And then at the end of the book, and I'm just going to read this little excerpt at the end. For a Sphinx-like, her mother's life would always remain a riddle to her children, particularly to her daughters. Probably most of her secrets Jewel would take to the grave with her. Like the mother lode in a mine, good information would die untapped with her. We don't need to talk about it. It's too painful to talk about would always be her unspoken motto. Nevertheless, Jewel's life, like an underground cavern replete with stalagmites and underground lakes, would always run in the hidden recesses of their blood. And on a wind-blown night, unrecounted memories of Oriole, Mama Lovey, and all the others would haunt a sleepless dream. No words, no outcry, no shame. When Imani ended the rolling tape, she asked, now are you sure you have nothing else to share other than you went to Sunday school picnics with your kids? No, Jewel said, that's about all I remember. Through the lens Jewel's eyes had filmed over, she was looking off into the distance as if she could already taste the smoke rings of a cool cigarette. Do it, boy. You know, you never get over the loss of your mother. So anyway, sometime when I get lonely, I read about her. And my mother made a way out of no way, and we were standing here today because of her. Oh, thank you. Okay, thank you. I hadn't even known that I even still would feel like that. Okay, thank you. Okay, so thank everyone, and if you have stories to write, get in touch with me. Thank you.
Thank you.